Okay, so some people have asked me how you make a bandage tsuba out of bandages for training in bojutsu and kenjutsu. So I said I would make one. So I'm going to demonstrate how one goes about doing that. So we start by, I've got a stack of bandages here. I've bought 10. I'm not sure whether I will need all of them or not, but we'll crack on and see. Just open this up. So we start out by getting our roll of bandages. Voila. It's quite thin, gauzy material. So the first thing you want to do is roll out a bit and basically just tie a knot and make a loop. So I'm going to just squeeze that in. So now I have a loop. Now, I want the loop to be, shrink it a little bit, maybe about that big. So what I'm going to do now is I'm literally just going to start passing this through and going around, and it'll kind of, not much will happen for a while, and then we'll get to the point where as I push it through and move it around, it'll start to thicken a little bit. So you can see I'll do one bandage and then we'll put it onto slow motion so you can see all what's happening. It doesn't have to look particularly neat at the beginning because you're just building up a little bit of bulk. It's all going to get compacted towards the end. And we start to see, you can see now it's starting to make a kind of a loose donut shape. So now I'm going to make a little bit of an effort to open out the bandage as I go through to make it broad. And that will start to smooth out the outer surface of the ring, where you can see that the actual size of it has kind of increased a little bit. But bear in mind, when we're finished, we want the aperture, the hole in the middle, to be quite narrow because we want it to friction fit to our bokken or bokuto. So that's where, as it thickens, that hole in the middle is going to get smaller and smaller, and we're nearly there. So I'm going to film this just to the end of this row of bandages, and you can see that we have something like a sort of a small donut, I suppose. Flick it through, and when it comes time to add the next bandage, all I need to do is just lay it over, and then I don't need to tie it on, I just lay it, and you can see that's what we're working with. That's one bandage. Okay, so I bought 10, it's probably too many. We'll see how many we get up to, maybe 6 or 8. Okay, so I'm going to pause this video now and then do a sort of stop motion job and then finish it, and you'll see back then the end. So as you get towards the end, I'm on my 7th bandage here, you'll notice that it starts to get tricky to fit the actual bandage to the core. The trick is to keep going at this point because, as I said, if you want the tsuba to stay on a polished wooden bokuto, you need it to have a decent friction fit. So I want the hole in the middle to be relatively small compared to compared to the size of the sword. So the trick is to make sure that it's difficult to fit the tsuba onto the bokken when it's done, and for that to be the case, you need that to be, probably a little smaller than that. We might go, I think probably we're going to end up doing this maybe with one more bandage and make it up to 8 in total. And if you can see that if it's not entirely symmetrical, then you can actually just sort of tighten the way you're wrapping to bring it into shape. It doesn't really matter. The most important thing is that you end up with a tsuba which is big enough to cover the size of your hand with your fist when you're holding the weapon. So there we go. So we'll put that down and plug out one more. Okay, there we go. So put that on, and then this one I'll just lay it on top just to make sure it overlaps a little bit, and it's now getting kind of tricky to get that in there, which is actually what I want. So it should be when you get to that point, you're kind of approaching the end. Thing is, I think people sometimes make these a little bit too small because maybe they just don't buy enough bandage, they don't realize how many it's going to take. Or also the other thing that can happen is they're sort of thinking in terms of the size of a conventional tsuba, like the type that are found on katana or on iaito, and this is a slightly different thing. So the reason why you might want one of these is that if you're practicing bow, particularly our Kukushin Ryu bow, then there's lots of occasions when the person can swing the bow and you're using a bokken to receive, and there's a possibility that if the bow bounces or slips or slides down the bokken, it'll hop over the tsuba and crack you on the knuckles, and depending on how hard and fast you're training, that could actually kind of break your fingers or break your knuckles. So this, by making a big padded one, it deadens the hit. It takes the energy out of the hit. And I'm gonna go. That's 8 bandages. But I'm actually just I'm gonna go one more, I think, because I'd like that to be a bit more, just a tiny bit bigger and a tiny bit more secure. And 9 is a nice symbolic number, so let's go for 9 bandages. And that's gonna do it. Let's see. Now this time I know I'm going to have fun getting that entire roll of bandage through that hole. We're there. And of course, as we unroll the bandage, it gets a little bit thinner each time. But now I'm going to try to make a little bit of an extra effort to try to space this out nicely so that the external appearance of it is neat. It doesn't really matter, but you want, why not? If you have a choice between something being neat or not, why not make it neat? So my experience with these is they last a long time, but actually over time they sort of compact down, so they can end up being a little bit smaller after a year or two than they were when you made them, because they just get used to the compression of being pushed onto a bokken. If that happens, you can always just add another couple of layers of bandages, and if they start to get a bit discolored because of the sweat from your hands or maybe the oil off the bokken, that's another solution. You can actually just wrap another couple of white bandages around it, and it'll look less like something you found in a swamp, and more like something you might want to use for Budo practice. Okay, we're getting to the end of this. I think that looks about right to me. And so now I need to think about how am I going to finish this off. And I've never really found a good way to do this. I just just take my excess, spread it out, bring this over, and maybe just kind of try and tie it off a little bit. Can I get that back to the thumb under there? And just so it could be neater. Okay, so that's what you get. That is a bandage tsuba. That took 9 bandages. So that cost about €9. The bandages cost about €1 each. I'm sure you can probably get them cheaper if you shop around a bit. But that's exactly what you want. And you want a hole of around that size. You can see it's just basically a bit bigger than my finger, because that will squeeze onto a decent sized bokto and it'll hold its position.